General Abdoulaye Coulibaly, the man of Alassane Ouattara, humiliated at Roissy Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. Difficult times for Ouattariie in France. The star of the Ouattara regime seems to be fading even beyond the Ivorian borders, and the recent events at Roissy Charles de Gaulle Airport bear witness to this. General Abdoulaye Coulibaly, one of Alassane Ouattara's most loyal henchmen, suffered a scathing humiliation as he prepared to embark on a confidential mission to China. Prevented from continuing his journey, he was sent back to Paris. A symbolic setback which says a lot about the growing isolation of the Ouattara regime on the international scene. A regime in search of strategic sales. Officially sent to China for a mission on behalf of the Ivorian state, General Coulibaly was preparing to negotiate a controversial project, the transfer of the Félix Houphouët-Boigny International Airport in Abidjan to China. This approach comes after the hasty wresting of the management of this airport from French interests, an operation orchestrated under the leadership of Alassane Ouattara. The latter, in a headlong rush typical of regimes at the end of their reign, seems ready to sacrifice the country's strategic infrastructures to guarantee external support.
Chers frères, chères sœurs, l'année 2024
Dear brothers, dear sisters, the year 2024 also saw the continuation of our investments in ports, roads, energy and telecommunications. We will continue this momentum with the rehabilitation and extension of the Félix Houphouët-Boigny International Airport, to give our country an airport that matches its economic and tourist ambitions. Our national airline, Air Côte d'Ivoire, will launch long-haul flights in a few months, which will start with Paris and extend to Washington, New York, London and Geneva. This attempt to sell a national jewel like Abidjan Airport illustrates the voracious appetite of a regime more concerned with its survival than with national sovereignty. After outrageously courting France for more than a decade, Ouattara is now seeking to divert attention from his disastrous record by redirecting his alliances towards China. But the clumsy maneuver clearly failed in its first step. France dissociates itself from its protégé. The refoulement of General Coulibaly in Paris is not a simple technical incident, but the sign of a profound disavowal. France, long a strategic ally of the tyrant Ouattara, seems to be distancing itself from a regime undermined by nepotism, corruption and authoritarian management of power. This diplomatic affront marks a clear break. Alassane Ouattara is no longer the essential man he claimed to be on the international scene. By publicly humiliating one of its closest men, Paris is sending a strong signal. French leaders, increasingly embarrassed by the abuses of the Ouattara regime, are visibly seeking to diffuse criticism of their historic support for Abidjan. This pushback resonates like a warning to the top of the Ivorian state. The tide has turned, and Ouattariie no longer benefits from the same indulgence. A general caught in the contradictions of the regime. The role of General Abdoulaye Coulibaly in this affair reveals the opaque practices which plagued the management of the Ivorian state under the despot Ouattara. Responsible for a mission as sensitive as the sale of a national airport, he embodies both nepotism and the exploitation of public institutions for the benefit of private interests. That a high-ranking officer in the army is diverted from his sovereign responsibilities to negotiate a dubious economic deal testifies to the dangerous amalgamation between state affairs and personal interests at the top of power. Growing isolation for the tyrant Ouattara and his men. The Abdoulaye Coulibaly affair is symptomatic of the difficult times ahead for the Alassane Ouattara regime. The international scene, previously docile in the face of abuses of power in Abidjan, now seems ready to sanction blatant abuses. Diplomatic isolation, loss of popular support and financial scandals accumulate, auguring a chaotic end to the reign. This new failure in Paris exposes a stark truth. The Ouattara regime, once glorified as the champion of economic stability, is revealing itself to be a house of cards built on autocratic practices and strategic compromises. The repression of General Coulibaly is not just an incident, but the symbol of a system running out of steam, rejected both internally and externally. A Côte d'Ivoire in search of renewal. The Ivorian people, witness to these absurd and costly maneuvers, cannot indefinitely tolerate such contempt for their sovereignty and their aspirations. The sale of Abidjan Airport, if it were to succeed, would be an additional betrayal in a long list of acts against the national interest. It is time for Côte d'Ivoire to turn the page on these shameful practices. The humiliation of General Coulibaly in Paris must be a wake-up call. The Ivorian people deserve governance with integrity, respectful of its institutions and concerned about its future. In 2025, what do you no longer want to see in this country? That's the guy. That's the guy. Real Ivorians already know. That's the guy. Which guy? You see, right? So for you in 2025, is this what you don't want to see? Chris Yapi does not lie. Find Chris Yapi on his 2 YouTube channels, his Rumble channel, his TikTok, X, Instagram, VK and Threads accounts.